Welcome to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, Thapelo, welcome to the show. Today, we'll be discussing the LGBT community, and we'll be educated on how you and I, and the role that we can play in getting us where we need to be as a society. To educate us on this, we've got a guest today who is a leader in society, who is the founder of Access Chapter 2, an activist of human rights, feminism, LGBTI community, and social justice. And arguably, most importantly, a hustler. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So Steve, let's get right into it. So I've done the YouTube introduction. Can you give us the actual introduction as to who Steve is?
All right.
What do you identify as, and what do you do?
Sure. No, thank you so much. I'm Steve Letsike. I'm the Executive Director and Founding Director of Access Chapter 2. And of course, my pronoun is she, her. I'm, of course, a black lesbian woman, proudly so. I think besides some of the roles that I occupy, I'm currently the co-chair of the South African National AIDS Council. In fact, in this country, I sit in two councils. So that's the National AIDS Council and as well as the Pharmacy Council. I'm involved, most of my activism also is within the public health space to address gender inequality, the rights of LGBTI persons, and specific tailored services. I do quite a lot of advocacy policy work, not only just in the country, as well as regionally and globally. So also recently have been elected as the chair of the Commonwealth Equality Network, which consists of 54 Commonwealth country members. And this is really a space where we want to decriminalize the challenges and human rights or decriminalize the homosexual act in over the countries of Commonwealth. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm a mother, I'm a wife to my wife. So it's quite important to embrace family values for me for that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So your journey in activism comes from very far back from school days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So then you didn't identify yourself as a normal girl.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How did you identify as back then? What's the normal?
Of course. Well, I think first we have to acknowledge that back in the days, it's unlike now, in the 20th century or 21st century. We did not have templates. We did not have terms or words such as lesbian, gender non-confirming, gender fluid, or gender diverse individual, or trans. We did not have those terms. I grew up in the township. I am from the rural, or my family is from the rural community. So these words never really existed. So the idea of heteronormativity, we've seen it in family settings, but also we've seen it in society, that one could either be a woman or a man. And if you are diverse with your gender as a child, you are actually challenged in terms of the template you will follow. So, in my very, very, young toddler days, I used to think that I was a boy before I got in touch with my own body. And, so for me, it was quite an interesting journey as young as about 7, 8, 9, 10, that, I was identifying as a boy. And that's, for me, the knowledge or the perspective that I saw in front of me was my grandparents, right? And I knew I just didn't want to dress like my grandmother. I knew I wanted to dress like my grandfather. So pants, shirts, jackets made sense. Okay, I identify as a man, then I'm a boy, So for me, it was exactly that. Only in my teens, probably just early teens, that getting in touch with my body. I'm a girl, biologically a girl, my identity as a girl, and owning it, and self-determining that I'm a girl was exactly that. So I think the distinguishing of what happened pre-teens, as a child, and I was a child, and my family allowed me to be the child. And I was comfortable to, simply psychologically transition for myself in knowing exactly who I am.
Okay. So we'll come back to the terms and the structures.
Sure.
But prior to that, you said you were raised by your grandparents,
Sure.
who you have highlighted were largely open and welcoming.
Yeah.
But the community, were they also opening, welcoming? What challenges did you face?
Yeah, I mean, even with my family as well. I was raised, of course, by my grandparents. Both my parents died when I was little, when I was 7 years old. And of course, my siblings and I were raised by our grandparents for that. I mean, it wasn't as smooth as one would regard it, because the time where I came back home, there was a prayer session held for me, right? Because, look, we need to cast this evil spirit. We're not sure what is happening with this child, So I think it's some of the journeys. For the community, I mean, we've had ups and downs. I've always been out and open. I didn't have to, come out and say, hi, I'm lesbian in my teens, right? Because I've always been different. My entire life I've always been different. So I think for the most part of it, the community that I live, my immediate community, same street, same 2-3 streets away, have not really isolated me. And I think the more now, because if you are growing up in a township, you're exposed to other people who are stigmatizing, who are discriminative, who are also homophobic for that matter. My schools that I've went through, also, I've had ups and downs in school, whether around the school uniform and so forth. I think fortunately for me was the fact that I used to be a soccer player, right? So already I was in a team that was enjoyed and celebrated by the community. But secondly, already at the age of 13, I was already involved within the ANC youth organizing, and it was transitioning period for our country. So for me, the fact that I was out and involved in activities beyond just about my sexual orientation, and I actually did not know my sexual orientation possibly until I was 15, right? But the fact that I was just diverse young girl who just did not conform to the societal expectation of what a girl, cis girl, must look like.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah.
So before we get into the actual politics
Sure.
Of LGBTQI, can you just outline, explain what is LGBTQI and also LGBTQIA plus?
Yeah.
What's the difference? What are the terms? What do we? Yeah, just can you break them down for
us? The acronym can go on and on and on. The term LGBTQIA plus. Let's just do that. Here in Access Chapter 2, we use LGBTI plus, and we just accept that diversity goes on non-stop. But L stands for lesbian, G stands for gay, B stands for bisexual, T for transgender, I for intersex, Q for queer or questioning, A for asexual, plus is that sexual orientation will not be limited. People can identify. But I think it's important to even break down. The acronym is just not one person. So you don't look at Steve and say, Steve is LGBTI person. It's actually an acronym that speaks about a number of people. It's a population, but with different diversity. Lesbian gay speaks to sexual orientation. So the same way we speak about heterosexual, lesbian, gay, bisexual, yes. It's sexual orientation. Bisexual, it's a person who's attracted to both sexes. It may not mean the same time. Lesbian and gay are attracted to same sex. Heterosexual, of course, is opposite sex. And then you have T, which is transgender. Transgender speaks to persons who are transitioning, whether through identity or through a physical transition. It's a person who identifies not with the sex that was assigned at birth. So their gender, it means you are moving from one to another, right? So if somebody could have been born male, and if they are transgender, and they would be regarded transgender woman, and they would have then transitioned to being transgender woman. Similarly, trans men, they would have been born female. So they have to transition, and they know because they self-determine, right? It can be both at a level of identity expression, but because you can transition physically, you can then start hormones. You can go for what we call surgical care, where you transition physically as well. So those are transgender individuals. Intersex regards, it's about biology. When a child is born, we're saying what is always spoken publicly, oh, a child is born female or male. Intersex is never spoken to, and which is a big problem, right? We have it globally. This is about sex characteristics when a child is born. Their sex may be ambiguous because there are a lot of various sex characteristics. So you can't say one intersex is representing all. Different chromosomes, hormones, or physical genital may differ to define what exactly or who exactly is intersex. So that's quite important. And then, of course, the word queer or questioning, for a number of people who don't want to be classified in any other, they would use the identity of queer, which is not just sticking to a particular label of any. Plus, it goes on and on. It's intersections, it's acknowledging and appreciate that people who self-determine are not just limited to biology. They also, their identity, their spirituality, their emotions, and all others are quite what makes a human being. So LGBT is an acronym.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going into the politics, what you're saying,
yeah.
There has been, the biggest part that has been brought to the fore is discussions about gender, and in sports in particular.
Sure.
What's your view or what's your take on that? Because there are discussions that someone who would have been born a man and transitioned to a woman, now competing with other women, is unfair. What would the discussion, what is your view on that topic?
Yeah, but unfair on who? Because first is that a transgender person who have self-determined, who understand their bodily autonomy, who identifies as a woman, aren't they equally deserving to be part of the women's sports?
I'd say so, but that's, yeah, okay, no, fine, fair enough.
It's a journey that we ought to take. So for me, when a person who's cisgender says that, no, why do we have a transgender person, or trans woman in the women's category? Or why do we have a trans man in the men's category? Men will never say, oh, okay, we've got a transgender man, okay, it's unfair. No, they would say, come on, we'll actually even beat you because So there's this perception. And I think we need to speak about agency and agency of people, but dynamics of addressing inequalities even amongst ourselves is quite important. Transgender women are women. And if our constitution says nobody should be discriminated on the basis of gender, they just didn't make gender just about men and women. they spoke about gender and gender diversity. And we have just actually wanted to interpret our constitution to feed our own ideology of what constitutes a man and a woman binary. So the binary is what must be disrupted. And if it's unfair, well, people have to live with unfair. The world is unfair. And the world has been unfair on LGBTI persons for such a long time. Let it be. We'll get to the fairness of it until it's enjoyed by everybody.
So zooming out of the sports and now just going to the general politics,
Sure.
How does politics influence the LGBTI community? Why should the LGBTI community care about sports? But even outside of the LGBTI community, why should I care about sports and, sorry, not sports, the LGBTI community and politics?
Sure.
And what's the current landscape?
Yeah. Well, I think politics are our everyday life. Personal is political. It's how we apply it. It's how we put it into practice, right? You know, economy is political. Social is political. Our lives are political. And why should LGBTI care about politics? Because it's really about our lives. You know, we live, we breathe social economy. You know, daily development, our livelihood. It's political. And I think it's quite important because we come from a history of colonialism here in South Africa, like many other countries in the region, where we are regarded even as the global south, the third world countries. You know, the first worlds have already determined their position in the world. So it is a matter of urgency around developmental agenda. So our history of colonialism has actually oppressed a lot of people. We were oppressed because we are black. We were oppressed because we are women. And now we are oppressed because we are lesbian. So the consistent sides of struggle remain political agenda. We have not even won today the battle of race, where even a black man walking in the street will not be feared. A black man walking the street, we might have changed the ruling of, you know, black people walk there, white people walk there. We still have not gotten justice about the divide of race. We may have a black president, but our pathway of reconciliation, of justice, where black, white, colored, Indian would be on an equal footing, it's still a black person who still needs to prove themselves the just. It's still a woman. In 1956, when women marched here in Pretoria, they marched for a reason. And they just didn't march just because their identity documents or whatsoever. They fought because women, patriarchy took over and dominance of men took over. Look now, we're still talking about a gender balance, where we're saying we want women in positions of power, women on decision-making table, women in parliament, women in businesses, and so forth. It's still a struggle to get to that goal. And it requires us to understand the politics don't change overnight. Similarly, here in South Africa, it was only in 1994 when it was made legal. We had people like Simon Nkoli, Beverly Ditzi, Phumi Mthethwa, and many others who came before and after them, who organized to fight for gender identity, sexual orientation to be included in the Constitution. So it matters to have organizations such as Access Chapter 2 to continue fighting for the rights of LGBTI people. It matters to have organizations such as Embrace Diversity within politics, LGBTI desk within politics, so that the injustices of the past can be corrected. And nothing about LGBTI people without them. Nothing about women without them. So we have to make sure that we repair those injustices of the past.
With that said, how do you link the action of voting towards the advancing of the equality among the LGBTI community?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite important. Voting is a right and it's a responsibility, because this is an opportunity people have to put people in power, to put the right representatives in power to administer the work in the country. So for me, how we link LGBTI vote is that the representatives that are put in the office ought to represent everybody and are ought to uphold the Constitution. And why the LGBTI vote matters? It matters because we cannot take for granted the freedoms that we have, the liberation that we have, because it came at a toll of life. It came in costing lives that continue to be challenged now. And if we become too relaxed, we may actually reverse the gain or squander the Constitution for that matter.
LGBTI community is obviously a community that's bigger than South Africa. It's bigger than Africa. It's a global community. How has our leadership or our government done in comparison to regional and global?
Yeah. Let's start with this regional picture. We have over 30 countries in Africa out of 54 countries that still criminalize homosexual act. Globally, we have 70 countries that still criminalize homosexual act. And if you look at it, majority is here in Africa, because we've got other continents, Pacific Islands, Asia, Europe, Americas, right? We still have over 70 countries that still criminalize homosexual act. Now, how has South Africa played a role in the region or even globally? We've got over 18 pieces of legislation in South Africa, whether you're talking about what is referenced in the employment equity, the same-sex union, adoption policy, and so forth, right? So for me, these pieces of legislations are used everywhere, even America, for that matter. Only just provided equal marriage now recently. We've had it since 2006. So I'm just giving you typically how and where we come from. Now, the role South Africa has in the region, it's not just about a sister-brother, sibling kind of relationship. South Africa ought to be a leader of society, not only here in South Africa, but in the region and globally. Which means if we can build solidarity continuously because of our history with the Cubans, our history with a shared struggle with the Palestinians in this matter, we ought to be in solidarity even with African countries.
So a lot of work has been done, and you should get a lot of credit, because I personally know, and from your bio, that you have done quite a lot of work,
Sure.
especially through Access Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Now, for our viewers, would we want to now turn our conversations into change? Like you're saying, there's still about 70 plus countries
Sure.
that still need to be addressed, that still need to implement change to accepting the LGBTI community. How do we transform these conversations and take them to the rooms where the discussions matter, where we can change as our viewers and myself?
Yeah. Until we have honest, frank discussions, and where there's ignorance or where there's a gap of information, we empower one another. We educate one another to bridge that gap. And we also get to a stage where we unlearn certain things that we have learned, that we thought the heteronormativity that we were taught is the only way of living. where we actually even unpack the family unit. My family, it's 2 women and a daughter. LGBTI people, when they grow up, they want to be having their own families. Me being lesbian doesn't mean I can't give birth. It's just the way I will make a baby, which is different, right? Gay men would want to be married and have children. So trans people would also want the same. So me being lesbian does not make me different. It does not make me less of a parent. I have a 19-year-old girl. She's in a tertiary level, well looked after, taken care of. We all can do the same, like any other family. We are not just a nuclear kind of family. And while we are at that, by virtue of saying, let's redefine what makes a family, we will all understand that a family can be nuclear, mother, father, children, 2 dogs, sure. A family can also be a granny-headed household, or a single-parent household, or it also can be a same-sex kind of household. For me, the viewers who are watching this have a responsibility to reflect and look at their role in making sure that everybody can enjoy rights, but also everybody can live in harmony.
You know, as you were talking about family and relationships, it reminded me of a line in a song from Frank Ocean. I forgot the song. But the line is something along the lines of, love isn't between man and woman, but between love and love. And I think that's a beautiful line that speaks to.
Absolutely.
But, back to the politics side of it, sorry, got caught up in a moment. You mentioned the departments. Which other departments have Access Chapter 2 engaged with?
Yeah.
And what role have they played? What role can they still play?
Yeah.
And I guess if you want to take it a bit further, you can add the youth element into that.
Sure.
Where do they come in?
Absolutely.
And,
yeah. Look, we have, since our establishment as an organization, we have constantly worked to improve how government implements its work. We have a government that is for the people, and it ought to be that. We've worked with departments such as health, we've worked with social development, we've worked with home affairs, we've worked with justice, and in fact earlier I was in a meeting with the Department of Justice. We've also worked with Department of Women, Children and Persons with Disability. We've worked with Department of International Relations and Cooperation. We've worked with COCTA, Corporate Government and Traditional Affairs. Presidency this year, I think it was, yes, indeed, for the first time. Our own government, South African government, had observed International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. It was through our work as Access.
Which day was that?
So that's 17 May. Every year, globally, on the 17th of May, the world observes this day to commemorate the people we have lost, who may be trans, lesbian, gay, or even bisexual for that matter. So it is called International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, because we lose people every day because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. So a day that really challenges homophobia and transphobia globally is observed on the 17th of May. So when you see what the government did, was to not only just put out a statement, but on their social media placing posters, material that South Africa observes this day. And I think that was very instrumental. But we have currently Home Affairs that is reviewing the gender policy, which is wanting to introduce the third legal gender policy, because when you look at forms, a lot of forms male, female, and you don't recognize the gender diversity or gender non-confirming individuals. So about acknowledging and appreciating that. But it's not just the policy that is being introduced. In 2003, there was an act passed. It's called the Sex Change Act. It's called Act 49. So while the intentions were good, but right now there are some technical issues about that legislation that also would lead to some of the changes here. Home Affairs has been an instrumental department because of identity and gender marker, ensuring that people can amend their documents and have the identity documents or passport that speaks to them, or what do you call birth certificates, for that matter. Social development, focusing on the issues of shelter, psychosocial support, and so forth. Department of Health in 2016, together with the South African National AIDS Council, launched the first of its kind, the LGBTI HIV plan. This is the first of its kind, not only just in South Africa, but also across this region, even across the world, because the countries like Brazil, in fact, Argentina, UK, caught up only later, So I'm just giving instrumental steps that our government has taken. The Department of Justice have launched the National Task Team, of course, which was a compliance when there was a petition that was done to Minister of Justice then in 2011. But this National Task Team continues, and they've now recently developed a national intervention strategy for the next 3 years. So that's Department of Justice. Both Minister and Deputy Minister have been really instrumental and vocal around the issues. The last, of course, one department that I want to mention here is the Department of Basic Education, which is now developing the SOGESC policy around how school must operate and work to address challenges faced by students, young people, for that matter, youth, for that matter. 74% in our country of LGBTI people in school setup are still being discriminated. So issues around school uniform are important, bathrooms, and how the peers and teachers can relate. Comprehensive sexuality education must be implemented for all students in a way that equip students to knowing and making the right decision about their development approach.
Access, Chapter 2, has done a lot of work. I don't believe for the viewers, I don't believe we've broken it down. Where does the name come from? What does it do?
Sure.
And how can the viewers get involved? Please.
Sure. Chapter 2, in fact, is our Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And we thought it was necessary that this very same Constitution that is celebrated globally is really acknowledged and it's accessible to everybody. So Access Chapter 2 is, the name derives from the Constitution, and we want to make this Constitution a lived reality for all. We are here in the center, which is regarded the head office. We operate in 7 provinces, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Free State, Northwest, and Gauteng. Of course, this is where we are having sites in, but we work nationally, regionally, and internationally. Here we have comprehensive services. We've got a clinic, we've got mobile service, so 2 buses that goes out as well to provide services, testing. We are part of solutions. We are not only just focusing for certain aspects of our work, just on LGBTI people. Our health service here are for LGBTI community, for youth, young people, any young person walking around, any need of health service, they can get it here. Any young person who needs pre-exposure prophylaxis or post-exposure prophylaxis can get it here. When they need ARVs, they can get it here because we are in partnership with the department for that. So hence I've made clear that our relationship with government has been instrumental in making sure that government does better. And where there are gaps, we bridge that gap. Our accountability in holding government accountable is by working with government in making things better for LGBTI community. So for us, it's been really instrumental. Our relationship directly with Gauteng province, provincial government, S1E district health has been really instrumental. We've got MOUs and a service level agreement to provide us with commodities, including blood service, waste management services to really address those needs.
There are a number of conversations which are being held, which is linked to what you were saying. Coming out, being in the closet. What are your views on that? On that conversation?
Yeah. Well, remember historically, the silence of people, the silence of acknowledging that there are same-sex practicing persons, there are trans persons, have actually costed lives. Anybody who was coming out who may be exposed to vulnerability, victimized, killed, that you actually have people who may lead life to secrecy. The way we have actually allowed religion, culture to oppress LGBTI people, because who wants to be walking around and be called, you are a sin, you are un-African, casted out. People ended up leading life of secrecy or characterized by secrecy. So it's that. But when you speak about those who are coming out, first, when you come out to self. I didn't have to come out to any, hi, I'm lesbian, hi, I'm gay, So for me, it's one of those things, to realize that. But I came out to myself because the templates that I had did not allow me to just be self. And I had to struggle understanding sexuality, where you are able to distinguish what biology looks and feels like, what gender, which is a social construct, feels and looks like, what sexual orientation feels and looks like for self. So I came out a number of times to me because it was a self-affirmation. For people who needed to come out, what often is regarded as coming out of the closet, kick that closet out, right? Break those doors. They come out to self. And I find comfort and value and strength and power in individuals who come out to their loved ones and say, Mom, I'm lesbian, or Mom, I'm gay. Remember, parents or families have never made it easier for a lot of individuals. If I walk around the house and I hear my mother or I hear my uncle saying, hey, Les is stubborn, or this child is gay, hey, you're wrong, he must be prayed for. Do you think it's a safe environment for me to say, but I'm also gay? It will never be, because I've heard how you actually perceive other LGBTI persons. So then people then have to be holding, by the time they say, Mom, I'm gay, or Daddy, I'm gay, they have to create an environment that is safe. And sometimes others don't come out to their own families because they fear how families perceive them. Well, come out to my friends, come out to people that I trust. But there has been quite a lot of experiences. LGBTI people are rejected by their families. They are kicked out. They remain homeless because of the very same homophobia and transphobia that exist within the family and society. So when people come out, it's pride, and it's their joyful moment of being self. And they're not coming out for others, they're coming out for themselves, to be who they are, to embrace themselves, and to live their life in a way that they see fit, without any judgment. And that's what people are not anticipating. But judgments are on others, not on LGBTI people who come out.
What advice would you give a Thabo, Jennifer, Ndombi, who is at home, 17-year-old, has this feeling inside, don't know how to address it, environment's not that friendly, the fear of discrimination, of judgment? What advice or tips would you give the viewers there as to how they can overcome?
You see, we are never alone. Resilience has to be built. So if Thabo, Jennifer, Letsike, whoever has resilience in them, their self-esteem is strong, they may actually overcome individually. But we don't want to also move around with the idea of not acknowledging that things that makes us, our emotions, our psychological, our spiritual and so forth. There can be just this one person. They may not be in the family. It may be a teacher. It may be a nurse. It may be a friend or your friend's mother. That one person that you trust, that you can actually inform them that this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm trying to understand, and this is what I'm trying to address. So for me, you are never alone. Reach out. We here, even at Access Chapter 2, if you don't find anybody else of your loved one can do that, Access Chapter 2 can provide that space. Our center here is called We Belong Center, that any person who walks in must feel like they belong. They will not experience any judgment. So even if people are far and they can't reach here, they can reach us on our WhatsApp or on our inbox, or people are there to respond. We are there for you.
And lastly, in closing, a disclaimer that this is a phrase that I've stolen from one of Oprah's podcasts. She generally asks it as an end. What is the one thing you know for sure?
I know that I am loved, and I know that I self-determine. And one thing that I know for sure is that I know my purpose is to serve people.
Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to follow on the handles below, subscribe, and join us next time. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating and educating us.